This is David from WatcherPass.com, your website for movie news, reviews, interviews, deals, and recommendations. Today we're joined by Jayro Bustamante, the writer, producer, and director of the new Guatemalan horror film La Llorona. It's a movie that has a lot of historical context and it deals with some heavy political issues. So it's kind of an interesting movie for the horror genre. It also has kind of a fresh take on the La Llorona legend that I'm sure a lot of people know about, but haven't seen this one yet. The movie is available on Shudder, and it stars María Mercedes Coroy, Sabrina de la Hoz, Margarita Kénefic, and Julio Díaz.
Lo que se quedó atrás está atrás. No penses en eso. Que no te afecte.
¿Oyó a alguien llorar?
Lo que se quedó atrás está atrás.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
I appreciate you taking the time. I loved the film. I thought it was just such an interesting horror take, and it was really nice to see a horror movie that kind of, some horror movies deal with some tough issues, but this one seemed to have a really potent agenda and deal with some very tough historical facts and some tough historical conflicts. And so I was just wondering, is this something that you were inspired by, or is this something that you've kind of built in your past movies? I apologize, I haven't seen all of your previous films, so I just wasn't sure if this kind of having some sort of historical context or political issue involved in your films is something new.
Yeah, in a way, I really like movies when movies can be other thing than as only entertainment. So in my whole work, I'm trying to do something to fight against discrimination, and I think it's because my people are suffering so hard because of discrimination that I was focused on that in my previous works. And La Llorona is a kind of the end of a triptych. And in that triptych, I wanted to talk about the three worst insults that Guatemalan people use to offend other Guatemalan people. And that words are Indian, and it's very, very sad to understand that if we are the majority originaries from Mayas and you insult our origins, that means that we are not proud about ourselves and we are not loving us. And so the second insult is homosexual, and we use a very strange word because we use hueco, who means hole. And to say homosexual for men, for homosexual guys, and that's insult more than just talk about homophobia. It's talking about machismo and misogyny, because in a way people in Guatemala think that homosexual guys are becoming a little bit feminine, and becoming feminine, you are losing powers, or you are becoming less. So, and the third thing is communist. And communist doesn't have anything to do with the political idea. It's more an insult that we use to say the enemy, because in the 50s we were very, very influenced under the United States influence. So communism was the enemy, and right now we continue using that word to talk about the enemy. And in a country like mine, people who fight against human rights became enemies because they are not with the state, and the state continue being military here. And so that is my personal way, and that is my personal interest to talk. And when I was working on La Llorona, I was wondering, how can I talk about the recent history in Guatemala if people don't want to talk about that? Because if you talk about that, you became a communist or Indian defensor. So, and if you talk about women defending that, you became a defensor of women. That is not good either, you know? So, so I decided to use oral gender to package the message, because people love horror films. And I think there is a lot of power in that gender, because because people, when we watch a horror film, we are more open to be haunted. We are more open to accept very hard things coming to us. And the idea was use that opening of the audience to just put a good message inside.
Yeah, and I think, one of my questions is, why horror versus something more traditional like a documentary? But I think you're exactly right. If it makes, if it's any benefit, that's exactly what happened with me. I watched the movie and was intrigued, and then kind of read through some of the, things that you've said online and things that you've put out for what this movie was about, and it taught me a lot that I had never, something that I just had never learned about, and so it was really interesting kind of to read that and then draw those parallels back to what was in the movie. And so I think it's a really smart way to kind of get your message out, and even get the message out more broadly, rather than kind of have it focused in one specific domain. So it sounds like this film, it has some aspects with two of the words that you were kind of talking about, the machismo and then the communism. Those were kind of both resonant in there. In your previous films, have you dealt with homosexuality, or is that something for some future film? Or
no, I used the first film. I decided to talk in my first film about Indigenous people and how Indigenous people are suffering, because they are not just discriminated. They don't have access to any kind of services. The more poor, I mean. There is not health services, schools, or anything. So that was the first one. And the second one is Tremors. It's talking about LGBT community, but not only about that. It's talking about how families and church are involved in this process to cure homosexuality. And the third one is La Llorona, that you know.
that's quite an undertaking. I'm amazed that you've got, you're so driven to put this information out there. Is it one thing I was wondering is, for a film that seems to have more of a political message, or more of a maybe something that the government might not agree with, did you get some pushback in making the film, or did you get some pushback from people that you might have wanted to be in the film because they were worried about being in something like that?
Normally in my country, people don't love this kind of works because we have this heritage of silence. We love silence. We love turn the face to the other side and don't talk about our problems. And we just want to show our beauty side. So that is very difficult to make people understand here in my country that it's very important continue to talk about that kind of problematic, because normally human beings can repeat our mistakes. Mm-hmm. And so in that way, I think I'm not the most loved in my country. And we had a lot of people who give us their advices, telling us don't make that film. And I think a lot of that advices can be called menaces or threats. So mm-hmm. it was hard and continue to be hard. You know, I remember in a party, some guy come to me and tell me, stop doing that kind of films. You don't wanna win an Oscar with that kind of messages. And I said, but it's not the Oscar the goal. You know, there is another thing. There is another message to do. There is to give.
Yeah, that you know, I think your film is going to be remembered, you know, whether or not it wins an Oscar, but it's going to be remembered because it's going to get this message out and affect people. And I think that seems like your goal, and I think you've at least succeeded. I also have noticed that, you know, it's getting some interest on, you know, at least in the horror circles with people who just appreciate it for being a good horror film. You know, I love the updates to the La Llorona legend and some of the reasons behind it, but was La Llorona the legend that you always wanted to go with? Were there other options? You know, I thought it was an interesting kind of rebranding of what that legend has, but was that always kind of the focus of the movie?
Sorry, it was a little bit cut.
Oh, sorry. So, you know, was La Llorona always kind of the legend that you wanted to have be the vehicle for the story, or were there other ones that you thought through?
Oh, no, you know, we were looking for how tell the story, and in a moment, the real dictator in Guatemala died, and he passed away in impunity. And I remember that somebody tell me, he's not dead in impunity. It's La Llorona who keep him away. So it was the first idea to say, oh, La Llorona can be a nice character. And it was the opportunity to change a little bit the character of the legend, because in fact, the legend of La Llorona, if you know a little bit the classic one, La Llorona is very matches to like a legend. So it's always a woman who is weeping because a man quit her. And we were wondering maybe La Llorona can cry because a most important or relevant thing, like a genocide in a people. So I think La Llorona is perfect for that. And turn La Llorona to more like a justiciar and not like a ghost just hunting. That was the idea at the beginning. But there is other legends that I wanted to mix with La Llorona, because normally La Llorona is present like, you know, a white woman, dirty and monster face and all that. And I decided to use La Llorona more in a Dracula way, you know, very elegant, and say that can be a ghost coming from indigenous people, but really elegant and really like a princess, like Dracula is, you know, a princess from Transylvania. La Llorona can be a princess coming from Mayan people.
Yeah, and I love what the statement that you said earlier, that you wanted to turn her into something different. I kind of, you know, I like the idea of turning her into more of kind of an avenger. You know, she's out there trying to right injustices rather than being punished for some, you know, machismo type of situation. So I think that was a really smart choice, and I think it, you know, will get a lot of people thinking about this legend and the historical backstory behind it. Let's see, we've got not that much time. I know you have a hard stop. You know, one of the things that really kind of struck me is that the horror elements in this film, the you know, I wouldn't call they're very understated. It's not, it doesn't have some of your traditional, you know, jump scares, a lot of, you know, gruesome elements and things like that. Is that the way that the film was already made? I mean, it's so carefully crafted that it wouldn't surprise me. But are there versions that maybe have kind of more of a traditional horror uh, timeline or more of a traditional horror story?
Oh, thank you for that question, because I think it was the most difficult task in our work when we were doing the film, because we didn't want to make in a way we were working like in a balance, saying that's a horror movie because the horror history, real history, and the horror facts coming from the gender. And we never wanted to have that side of the balance going that or that one. So we were putting a little bit in the gender effects to scare the audience, and putting a little bit in the historical part of the horror coming from a genocide. So it was very hard, and I think it was very hard because horror gender is so nice and give you a lot of freedom to work that you can lose your mind if you are just doing it, because there is a lot of pleasure, because even you like an audience when you are shooting, it's very easy to be affected by the horror. So it was very hard. It was very hard playing with these two sides of the balance.
And you know, one thing I really loved, you know, is the sound is just fantastic. You kind of have when the protests are happening, you kind of have them always in the background. And it kind of makes, even when they're in this, you know, this palace, it makes it feel very claustrophobic because they're kind of surrounded. You can always hear that. Is that inspired by some protests that you went to, or some real world events? You know, I guess what was the impetus to make that kind of constantly there in the background?
It was there is 2 points there, because in a way we had the reality in Guatemala, and you know, when our dictator in Guatemala was put in freedom, nobody came to protest because of discrimination, because that is a problem from the Mayan people. So nobody helped the Mayan people here. So I was very sad because nobody cares at the end. So I decided to say in my film, people will protest. And in another way, I was really inspired by some films using that that location where characters are put inside and they cannot go out, like in The Shining or the others. And there is always an element. There is always the snow. There is another element who keep them inside. So I think the protest people are the perfect pretext to keep these characters inside the house.
Yeah, no, they were. And you know, there were some scenes where they would be outside and people would say, "Be careful!" You know, they could throw rocks. They kind of made it so even though they were safe, they were always kind of under siege. So I know you have.
Sorry to interrupt, guys, but I need to go right over.
Okay, yeah. So I know, thank you so much. You know, what's next for you, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, I'm working a lot of different projects, but I think I will start soon a project talking about how humanity is taking care about children's, because there is another very big problem, and so maybe that's the next project.
Well, I'm just very glad that you are working and you are putting these messages out, because they're so important. So thank you so much for joining me. I know you have a hard stop. Thank you so much. It was a true pleasure to talk to you today.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye. That was Jayro Bustamante, the writer, producer, and director of La Llorona. It's a interesting horror film that kind of deals with some issues that you don't normally see in the horror genre, and it has a very understated horror elements, but it's a fantastic film, and it will probably inspire you to learn more about some of the underlying messages in it. It's available on Shudder, and it's kind of a perfect movie to watch late at night with the lights off. It has some really, really interesting things to say. If you like this interview, please like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. It helps the channel, and it makes sure all of our videos will come directly to you. The information is at the end of this video and also in the description. And as always, please go to watcherpass.com for all your movie news, reviews, interviews, deals, and recommendations. Thank you.
you